Old man doing a podcast. Real weirdos. We have English degrees. Real weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long.
So I have a question for you, Jeff.
Oh, fuck.
For Jeff, all right.
Jeff the chef.
I feel left out.
Well,
Good.
I guess I have a question for you as well, Jesse. It would just be from a different angle. All right. So
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. All right, cool. I kind of wanted my personal question, but like whatever.
All right. For Jeff, you often hear people ask chefs like if they had 3 ingredients to cook with for the rest of their life, what would they be? Because Jeff and I were having a conversation before about poultry and about how he said it's kind of boring to cook with. And then for Jesse, I guess 3 things that you would eat for the rest of your life. I don't know how much of a cook you are, if you want to be in on the question.
Jesse's got some skills.
Let Jeff handle this.
3 things. I mean, God, what has this podcast become?
Is it just for taste, or is it like, because you'd have to take nutrition into account, right? So you'd have to pretty much base it on that. You'd basically have to have 3 superfoods that would give you everything you need, everything a body needs.
See, but if I was in this situation at all, I'd want to die soon anyway. So I would just pick the 3 things that would be the most enjoyable to eat until I die.
It's like, give me sour Skittles, Cheese Whiz, and Dunkin' Donuts.
Nah, because like that would be cool for like an hour, and then you'd be anyone, not including not even more so my diabetic ass, but anyone would be sick.
Can it be 3 like different foods, or is it just 3 ingredients? Like, can you have cheeseburgers, double cheeseburgers, and curly fries? Does that count, or what?
I mean, from your side, the eating part of it, I'll give you like the whole assembled meal. But as far as the chef aspect goes,
ingredients. I mean, okay, don't overthink this, Jeff. Just say what comes to heart. Probably, probably potatoes, because they can be cooked 1,000 ways.
Okay.
I wouldn't bring anything perishable. Chicken or chickens.
Yeah.
Chickens.
My poultry?
Yeah. Because you got eggs there too, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
eggs are the most common answer I hear, honestly.
Yeah.
From most
well,
chefs.
I mean, yeah, you can eat them once. I'm not a huge egg fan. I mean, I like them. I hate cooking with them because you have to it's like a whole chemistry shit to cook with eggs properly.
Well, that's what I mean. They can be made into like sweet, like dessert pastries. They can be made into savory dishes. Like you can just use them as a lot of different things. I feel
potatoes, like 3 chickens and a rooster. If I could swing that in this stretched scenario, or like a chicken and a rooster. Fine, I'll just have a bunch of inbred chickens. I won't last very long. Whatever. And so like a chicken and a rooster, potatoes and salt. That would probably be
I was about to say, let's leave the spices as you can have all of those.
Oh, okay.
Because that's kind of unfair, right? Like,
that changes everything. I mean, all right.
Welcome to our movie podcast.
I'm not going to give you potatoes and not let you be able to like season it with some type of herb or spice or like garlic.
I honestly have never thought of this. Flour. There.
Okay, there's a big one.
Then I can make hardtack. There.
Yeah.
Fine. Boom.
Okay. Boom. Yeah, there you go.
Jesse hated every minute of that
segment from Wiener Dog Joe or something.
I felt that the whole time. I was like, this feels like
this is a conversation that me and Skylar would have on Wiener Dog Joe for sure.
I'm trying to think of I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I was waiting for Alex to be like, those are the choices. Like he had some kind of like thing up on the internet. No, just like some kind of thing up on the internet where it was like, if you choose these type of 3 ingredients, like you're autistic. Like I don't know. I don't know what.
Oh yeah, I was.
You thought he was leading toward a punchline?
Yeah, or just like some kind of like diagnosis of my psyche or something. Like he found some weird website that you like put in 3 ingredients and then it tells you like if you're gonna go like shoot up a school.
I did. I was doing a BuzzFeed personality test for the Royal Tenenbaums, and you are Dudley Heinsbergen.
Dude, that's perfect because I thought that Dudley perfectly represented the audience in this movie.
Oh my God, that's right. Welcome back to the Reel Weirdos. Believe it or not, we're a movie podcast. 2.5 white guys talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Today, we're talking about the Royal Tenenbaums 2001 film from Wes Anderson. And starring pretty much fucking everybody, as happens in his films. And this is an Alex choice. So, Alex, do you want to describe briefly the Royal Tenenbaums and say why you chose it for the show?
Yeah, so it's about a father of a basically aging, like, dynastic kind of family that was really famous and really, like, had a lot of potential when they were young. And he has 3 children, and he's like fallen out with the family, split up from the wife, and it's about his crazy ploy to get back into their life, seemingly in a sentimental way or in a way to kind of like con them because he's getting kicked out of his residence. And that's basically the summary of the movie. And I chose it because I think it's actually the tightest of all of Wes Anderson's films.
Is it your favorite Wes Anderson
movie?
It
is. It is also my favorite one. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the other ones, there are other films that like I like just as much. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite Wes Anderson film out of a few that he's done, because he's done a few that I think are just really, really solid. But I think this is like through the passing of time, I think this one will be looked at back the most fondly.
Well, we were talking before we started recording, and you've seen this legitimately like 50 times, you said.
Yes.
Like not hyperbolic.
Yep.
Which is insane.
I know, it is.
It's crazy. I don't know if I've seen anything that much. Maybe Space Jam when I was a tiny child and just had the VHS tape.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I was trying to think in preparation for this, what was the first Wes Anderson I'd seen. I think it was probably Life Aquatic in high school. Mm-hmm. I think that was around that time where I would have been introduced to it. And I had actually not seen the Royal Tenenbaums. I've seen every Wes Anderson movie after that, except for the brand new one.
Okay.
And I've loved all of them. My favorites, it might be a 3-way tie between Life Aquatic. I fucking love Darjeeling Limited. I don't know what it is about that movie that tickles me, that brother dynamic, perhaps.
Oh, it's so good.
And then Grand Budapest is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I think Royal Tenenbaums might be my least favorite.
Okay.
But I did watch it twice, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Got it.
So that says a lot for Wes Anderson in terms of what I think of him and his ability. It's funny, though, right? Like, we've gone from shitting on Stargate to propping up Wes Anderson. So if you haven't clicked the X out of your browser, please do so now. Jeff.
Yeah.
What's your deal with Wes Anderson?
I haven't seen any of his films before. This is my first Wes Anderson movie. I haven't seen any of. I'm looking through his IMDb right now. Like, I've heard of a bunch, like Darjeeling Limited, Grand Budapest Hotel. Like, you know, these movies are very famous, and I've definitely heard of them. Life Aquatic. Yep, I've heard of a lot of these movies, but no, just never really seen any. So this is my first Wes Anderson movie I've ever seen.
Whoa. I didn't know that.
That's a big moment for the podcast. I had no idea.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean,
I just assumed.
Yeah, I've heard of him, of course. You know, like, definitely familiar with his name, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not as storied in a wide, diverse array of directors. I don't even know like who directs things until you guys tell me. So I just watch movies.
Well, how did you feel about, like, how was your first Wes Anderson experience then?
I don't know. Like, this movie is really fun. It's really fun. I found it to be, like, quite funny. Like, I thought it was, like, hilarious movie.
It is
like,
hilarious.
In a very unintentional way.
Mm-hmm.
It had some really dark moments, which I like. I really liked the cast. I think I did feel like everyone was very much playing a character. I mixed up caricature and character.
Caricature.
But everyone very much felt like a character in a play almost. Like, everyone really wore the same thing throughout the entire film. So it's like you kind of get this idea that like that's their costume, and their costumes very much say a lot about who they are as a person. So it's a very visual movie, which I'm assuming that's kind of Wes Anderson's thing, is like hyper weird. He very much loves the wide angle lens, which is cool. I rock with that. I thought it was a fun movie. It was very much a clown car of a movie in a lot of ways. Sometimes the pacing would it would be really fast, and then scene, and then a really long, drawn-out scene that doesn't really seem to matter, and then we're back to scene. Like, it's just he very much has a style of his own, for sure. And watching that video that you posted in the Discord, Jesse, I can see that other people think that as well.
Yeah. The video he's referring to is from Thomas Flight, who has a Wes Anderson video. I recommend it. It's really good analysis. But that's some interesting things you brought up there, especially as regards his visual style and the tone of it. I came up with some terminology when I was watching this one, and I call it sincere artifice, because it's like with a lot of directors, they're kind of blurred into the background. There's not a super strong authorial voice, at least in terms of like, how do I say this? You're not always aware that there's a director in a lot of movies. That they're like very much realist, whereas Wes Anderson is in his own little corner doing fucking cubism or something, and you're always aware that there's a director behind the camera, and he almost seems like, to me, like somebody playing with action figures, telling these little stories. Like the worlds that he builds are very artificial,
magical, fairy tale.
Magical, yeah. You want to jump in here, Alex?
Yeah, so I like what you're saying is perfect, because I have it written down in my notes that with Wes Anderson, I can like walk by a living room where someone's watching a movie, and I could see a frame of a film, and it could be any director. It could be Nolan. It could be, Scorsese, Coppola, anyone, Spielberg, who knows? But when I walk by a room, I literally would only need half of a second glimpse to know that it was a Wes Anderson film. Just one frame, even. Because his films are constructed almost like paintings, like frame by frame by frame. And then it's like a diorama almost. And then the characters move within them like a dollhouse almost.
Yes, exactly.
There's like a weird effect that he has. And that lends to, I think, Jeff's point of characters feeling very charactery. It's like they have their little outfits and their little get-ups and whatnot.
It's like characters in a storybook, and Wes Anderson is like reading you this weird story. It's almost like a children's story in tone, but then it gets really dark, and you're like, this is not for children. Like when you see Luke Wilson with his wrist slit, you're like, in glorious detail, you're like, this is not really for kids. It takes a much darker turn than you would expect. But yeah, it is like a weird dollhouse for sure.
That's his classic telltale sign too.
That's definitely a really strong way to put like the feeling I was having when I was watching this film, because I didn't know if that was intentional, and that kind of gives it more context, because I was like, wow, these characters are very much metaphors. They're all kind of walking metaphors for what the film is trying to say, I mean, I say that with like very heavy air quotes. Because,
what do you mean?
Well, the film is definitely about like fractured families and the effects that takes on the next generation, and how it kind of like all these kids of Royal have kind of manifested their depression and their crappy childhoods in a very unique way. And without having to tell you that, Wes Anderson instead is able to kind of show you it via the way he paints his characters. Like I very much like Gwyneth Paltrow's character as Margot, because she's very much a great representation. Like she keeps her hair the same as when she was a child. She wears that little like beret in her hair, which is like very much something like a child would wear. It's like a little pink beret that like no adult woman who's like a playwright would wear that. That's way too immature. Yeah, so she kind of they all still wear bits of their immaturity on them as kind of symbols of like the loads that they're still carrying from their shitty childhoods. Like Richie still has his tennis headband, and I always forget his name. Chaz. He's like always in his tracksuit, whereas originally he was always in his business suit. So for him, it's like this attempt to break away from his dad and the things that he emulated in his father. And it's very unclear, at least to me during the first watch, of like why they're rich. Like they're just rich, like, and it's fine because that's just the story and the setting.
Royal was a big time corporate like lawyer.
Oh, that's right. He was a lawyer. Okay, that's right. Yeah, so that makes more sense now because I was like, it's very unclear about like what makes this family have high status. Like I do remember it saying he was a lawyer and he got disbarred, but it was very quick.
And then Ethel was an archaeologist, I believe. Yeah, or anthropologist. Well, we all know
how much that probably doesn't make much money.
Yeah, but she was supposed to be like a well-renowned one, I guess. Yeah. And like a lot of the characters in the film, this is kind of like dovetailing into another point I have, but a lot of the characters in the film have like books, right? There are shots that show like, oh, this person wrote this. She wrote about her children and they're like prodigious genius and stuff like that. Bill Murray's characters, like, that like world famous like psychoanalyst of weird people and whatnot. So I was going to say that everything is so literary. This film is so literary. Like when people talk about, oh, film can also be literature. Everyone understands that connection, right? It's obviously literature because there's screenplays and things like that. It just then comes to life again in another medium on film. Whereas this film almost like it is so literary. If you were to write a book report about like the Royal Tenenbaums, you could do it, because you're like, everyone wears certain clothing that's metaphorical to them. Each character is like a metaphor. It's like the perfect junior high school book report movie. And I don't mean that in like a bad way. I think it's so well disassembled into stock literary characters without it being too bland, if that makes sense.
It is, but at the same time, it's almost like all of that you said told by a narrator who's coming off peyote.
Well, it is Alec Baldwin.
That's the best part. It is Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. Alec Baldwin. Who was the narrator in Jesse James? Because either that narrator was doing this, and Alec Baldwin. Like, I almost thought that it was the same narrator. It was crazy. I was like, is that the narrator from Assassination of Jesse James? Which it easily could have been. Alec Baldwin, I think, has done a few narrations, but I don't know. That was just taking me out of the movie sometimes because his like really like somber narration would come in with the gravelly voice.
It's funny because it is a novel, right? The movie is a novel. Like it goes through different chapters. And
it's presented as in novel form.
Each different scene, if you look at the actual writing, it's like exactly what the narrator says each time.
And it's in chapters.
Yeah, and then it ends. They close it. There's the little library stamp. The guy who does Napoleon Dynamite and Nacho Libre, it might seem
What do you mean does? The guy who
directs them,
it?
Excuse me.
Okay.
I think his name is John Heder. Or something, or Header.
No idea.
Anyways,
Header. That sounds right. Yeah,
he uses some of the like same similar over the top shots of like certain inanimate objects that are extremely colorful, and then characters will like interact with them. But it is very theatrical, and it's like almost like a play.
It is. It's like a play. It's funny, Jeff. It's interesting for me hearing Jeff describe it because for me, having seen where Wes Anderson goes with his career, this is like just the start of his over stylization.
Yeah.
it gets so much more storybooky and unique and quirky, and it goes into like a lot of people don't like Wes Anderson. And I get it. I get that it's a style that can irk some people. And I think other directors that try to do like, quirky indie style really irritate me, but Wes doesn't. I think it's because he's just in such total command of everything. Like we've talked about how like David Fincher is so meticulous and in command of everything that's going on in the frame. Wes Anderson is no less. It's just a completely different tone.
Yeah.
And this is like the burgeoning of that tone after Bottle Rocket and Rushmore and stuff like that. The tone and the style.
There are only a few directors who I feel like get a pass when it comes to constantly reproducing their style. I mean, look at Guy Ritchie even. He suffered like pretty dramatically compared to Lock, Stock, Snatch, those movies he had at the beginning. And he was like, he had to like kind of veer away from his style, didn't find a lot of success in that, and then kind of come back into his shell. Whereas there are directors like Quentin Tarantino who are not getting knocked for their style of, they're not repetitive, right? But it's like, you go to watch a Tarantino movie, you're going to expect some of the same film elements. And you go to a Nolan movie, you'll be able to spot some of the same ones.
Tarantino's a great comparison because he infuses his movies with himself to such a high degree. You're like, these movies are Tarantino in a large sense. We've talked about that before. There are some other directors, but Tarantino definitely comes to mind. Wes Anderson is certainly a vanguard of that. Like the best description I could summon, like when I was watching it this time, I pictured all these other directors. I sort of said this earlier, like just painting realism. They're like out in the field painting realism. And then Wes Anderson is just off to the side making just abstract weirdness.
Yeah.
And it's just so him. And it's so well done that even if you don't like the stories that he's being presented and you don't like the tone, if you're aware of filmmaking as an art form at all, it's impossible to deny that he is a master of what he's doing. And what he's doing is super unique.
Yeah.
In a way that nobody's done it before. Like the hyper stylization of like Fellini, there's a little bit of that where unreality seeps into reality. Where you're aware that it's a very constructed reality. That's why I love that we both went to the idea that this is a dollhouse. And he's this like whimsical fucking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory character moving around these action figures.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I wondered when I was watching this, I was like, does Wes Anderson have genuine love for these characters, or does he just like to see them suffer? And are they mutually exclusive? Can it be both?
Ooh, that's a good question that I have lots of feelings about, but I'm going to let Jeff answer it first.
Well, when I was reading about this movie, apparently, and you guys probably already know this, but like it kind of came about because Owen Wilson had originally suggested that Wes Anderson write a film about his family and his growing up. And he kind of began to do that and then veered very hard right in his kind of typical way, I guess. I don't really know, but it's just so that was kind of the inspiration for this movie. Now, obviously, this has nothing to do with his actual family at the stage that it is now. It's a very fictional universe, but yeah, that was the inspiration for the film. So, I think that, I think he does love these characters, but he tells a real story. Like the story, it's almost like Owen Wilson's character in this movie, Eli Cash, how he like kind of seems to be like veering in and out of reality throughout the whole movie because he's just so high.
That mescaline.
And so it's like, this movie has moments of clarity where like the dollhouse front is taken off and you see all the rooms, if I can continue the metaphor.
Oh, definitely.
You know what I mean? Like you can, like the suicide scene is obviously the best representation of that. But I really think that like Dudley's character is kind of a dark take on like, I don't know. His character was very underdeveloped, but felt like he had a bigger role in the film, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. He very much felt like the outside observer, but he's the one who's weird.
My favorite Dudley moment is when this, like the worst taxi ever pulls up to bring Gwyneth Paltrow away. And it makes no sense as a taxi. It's the worst looking car I've ever seen, completely covered in rust. There. One of the windows is just cardboard, and Dudley's like, yeah, hey, there's a dent in that car.
He's like my favorite. And I'm not joking when I say like Dudley's my favorite character in the movie.
My favorite scene with him is definitely when Bill Murray's taking his audio notes.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's colorblind, has an acute sense of hearing, goes over. And then from like 5 rooms down, Dudley's like, I'm not colorblind, am I? And you're like, it's weird because Wes Anderson always does that in this film. He sets up little lines like that, like acute sense of hearing, colorblind. He just jumps over it, and then he'll show you like 2 seconds later, Dudley's like hearing it from all the way down the room, but he's just really upset that he's colorblind.
You know, the comedy in this movie, it's not like jokes, right? It's not a movie that relies on jokes almost at all. It's all about just these characters are so well drawn, and the world that they inhabit is like so goofy in like a weird way that them just like interacting with it is funny. So naturally, and interacting
it's all
with each other.
incidental comedy. Whatever that word is. It like Royal and Pagoda's relationship, it was amazing. Like they had me cracking up the whole time. Like the little scene when they obviously like they talk about how he like stabs him and then he stabs him again later in the movie. Like I was cracking up when he stabbed him again, and then they just like get in the car and he's like patching him up in the hotel. Like it was there was just such perfect comedic timing.
I think the biggest laugh for me was when Owen Wilson is on mescaline in his house full of pornography and like weird paintings. And I don't know, something about that.
Well, that
and the deadpan way that he said he's on mescaline. I was just laughing. And I was like, what are these fucking paintings? Where did Wes Anderson find these paintings?
Did you just say you're on mescaline? I did indeed. Yeah. Very much so. It's like the best response.
It's so good.
But
Wildcats.
That scene is fucking hilarious too. I mean, every single one of Eli Cash's lines are like, like everyone knows that Custer died at the Battle of Little Bighorn. What my books predisposes is maybe he didn't. And then like everyone just eats it up, and you're just like, what the fuck is this guy? But to go to your question, Jesse, I think that if it was like intentional jokey, it would show that there was a real callous feeling from Wes Anderson towards his characters. Like they were just there to like further a joke, and that isn't what they're there for. They're very heartfelt. And I want to say that I watch this film a lot, but even as I get older, the story becomes more to me all about Royal. And Gene Hackman, I just want to say, he carries this movie as much as you can carry a movie in a Wes Anderson film, because there's just a whole other cadre of stars with you. But he is just so dynamic and so real and a force in this film. And I think that his acting and his performance really anchors the movie into one that is... It's really about this guy. It's like this character study about Royal and about how he is a shitty person. And you get that vibe from him right off the bat. You know, you can almost like smell him. Like the way he like just carries himself. He's just a con man almost. And he cons his way into the family. And then you realize that halfway through the film, and it's very apparent, the film realizes itself that it's a very poignant story now about this father who was like actually trying to reconnect with his children. But he's been such a con man for his entire life that he couldn't even come up and just say that. He had to build this entire elaborate scheme. He couldn't say, I got kicked out of my hotel. I miss you guys, and I'm like really sorry for all of this. Like maybe we could talk about working something out. No, he had to go on this crazy, fantastical journey to do it. And that's what the film is built around, in my opinion.
Imagine giving this premise to any other director and how it would not be funny.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, it's like a psychological portrait of broken people.
Yeah.
And like they're all just swirling around the nexus that is the patriarch of this family who left them.
Yeah.
And like the kids are all dealing with the psychological trauma of like having been left by their father. And Owen Wilson is off the rails. He like kills a dog. He runs over the family dog, and it's all really funny.
I know it's interesting.
Yeah, they highlight all these characters in a way that it's almost like Always Sunny in the sense that you can take a character and make them such a hyperbole of a human being that when bad things happen to them, you don't feel as bad because you're like, well, this kind of human doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
And this is not quite to that degree, but it has a kind of a sense of that. And I got a very like Arrested Development vibes off of the tone of the family.
Definitely.
And so there's a lot of inspiration we see from like other types of medium that has definitely come from this movie. Like this movie, you can tell has had an impact, and I love Danny Glover personally in this film. I think.
Oh, Henry's awesome. Yeah.
It was nice to see him. I couldn't remember the last time I saw him in anything.
Lethal Weapon.
I haven't seen that in 15 years.
But yeah, I mean, he doesn't play this huge role. He's not acting his ass off or anything like that, but he kind of plays the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
And you always kind of need that in this type of context. Like shows like Always Sunny don't have a straight man, and that's why it's able to get to the insanity that it can get. Whereas in this, you always kind of have the Henry Sherman is like kind of grounding everybody. He's like, he's the one that figures out Royal's scheme because he's the only one actually paying attention. He's the only one that's actually thinking like, oh, and then like when it says that, everyone's like gathered around his table and there's Tic Tacs and the cancer medication and all this kind of comedic stuff is happening, and he's like, oh, well, I know stomach cancer because my wife died of it.
Yeah.
And you're
just like,
it's like,
oh shit.
Boom, hard breaks.
Yeah.
But it works. It's not in like a bad way. It's like, and that's such a testament to the directing style because it's very hard, and writing as well. I mean, Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson wrote this movie, and like that you're able to kind of slam the brakes on the comedic effect going on and then pick it right back up again once that dust has settled. It kind of struck, it hit the nerve it needed to, and then it took a step back and continued on.
I think
was just great.
The movie is chock full of those moments, honestly. I mean, they pick up towards the end after our little, bathroom ritual, the little haircut that Richie gives himself, but there are moments at the beginning of the film, too, that, like, are extremely soft and delicate that come out of nowhere. It's like a freight train delivering you, like, cotton candy emotions, right? And you're like, what the fuck is happening right now?
Well, for the large amount of irreality that this is very much a heightened, like, storybook reality, the characters are very, like, they really get under your skin. They feel like real people, and you feel bad for them.
Yeah, it's almost like it does it works by the same mechanism as It's Always Sunny, just in the total opposite like direction, right? It's
trying to humanize instead of dehumanize.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
I feel like there's a moment in the film where, going back to Henry Sherman, where there's a little bit of friction between him and Chaz. They don't like there's friction between Chaz and everyone because Chaz is an uptight, like paranoid freak because of certain trauma that he's accrued throughout his life. But at the wedding, after what's his face, Eli crashes into everything, they're talking and Henry Sherman's talking about how he's like a widower. And Chaz is like, seems to like, he comes into the room and he's like, oh, like I'm a widower too. And Sherman goes, I know you are, Chazzy, and like puts his hand on his shoulder. And like there are little moments like that are just like so cutting, but I think that they define both characters so well, and it like makes sense that both characters would like react that way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, little realistic touches of like simple human warmth.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this movie's about trauma. Like, at least in my opinion, like this, when I see this movie's a clear, like, magnifying glass on trauma, like childhood trauma and how it moves on to adult trauma. And to me, it's clear as day. Like, that's the idea that I think Wes Anderson was going for when writing this is like, we can impact our traumas onto our children. Hence, Chaz's children kind of acting a lot like him and being very high strung. And Chaz has had double trauma because he's lost his father and his wife. And so he feels like truly alone in the world. and it only has his kids, and so he can't ever possibly think of losing them too. And so there's very much like this very real human element of feeling alone and feeling abandoned by your family, and that instead of trying to make that into like a moody, heartfelt type movie, Wes Anderson then takes that and then inserts that into these hyper colorful kind of fantasy-like characters, and is able to perfectly balance the comedy and the drama, and it just works.
No, yeah. I think that too, that Ben Stiller, he doesn't like act too much out of his range. Like, it is Ben Stiller, right? He's like acting kind of like Ben Stiller, the same mannerisms and quirks, but it isn't bad. It doesn't. I don't see him in this film, and I don't think he was miscast, honestly. I don't see him and think like, oh, you know what, like, I'm getting too much like Zoolander vibes. I'm getting too much blockbuster comedy vibes from him.
No, it didn't go over the top. Yeah. It didn't go over the top. Everyone is pretty well cast.
Yeah, it's just a little off. He doesn't quite fit with, I think, a theme that Gwyneth Paltrow and Luke Wilson were trying to go with, where they're both kind of despondent and removed. And I think that's, due to the fact that they're so alike, but also in love with each other.
Uh-huh.
But like, they both talk in a very like monotone, removed, quiet way. And then Chad Ben Stiller is like very animated and like very Ben Stillery, and that's the only part of the movie where I kind of felt like he didn't fit. Like if he was like a flat toned businessman, like, because it kind of set him up that way as a kid, I would have completed the trifecta of the children. Is like they all kind of became these despondent, super removed like human beings because they had no love in their life. I think that would make more sense.
I think it's better that they're varied, because I think it's wrong to say that they didn't have any love in their life. I think they just had it all to varying degrees. Like, for instance, the idea that your parents are able to provide such a stable environment that you can like start running a business at that age for Chaz is interesting, but then your dad is like stealing from you on the side, so it brings up this like dynamic where you're just like, well, this man who raised me is also like stealing from me, so you have that father-son dynamic with them. But then you have this thing where Richie gets to go out with the dad because he's like the athletically talented one, right? So he gets to go to the dog fights. He gets to like go around the city with dad and have fun. And when he comes home, they're all like sad and mopey up in the window, just like, we didn't get to go.
Yeah.
So you have that brother hatred too. And then of course the hilarious, which I think is just beautiful, this is my adopted daughter. I love how he just introduces her every single time as adopted.
He has to say that. Yeah. Yeah, I love there's so many little incidental details that I missed the first time, because there's a lot going on, and it's in a visual way in this movie and other ways, but how he takes Richie to the dog fights, and then he takes Chaz's kids to the dog fights later. Yeah. I didn't see that connection the first time, I think because at first, like, when the movie starts, you're just so keyed up in the momentum of things. But you were touching on some relationships there that lead me to some shots in this movie that I love. I have a list of shots. One of them is Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow on the couch, and they're listening to Gene Hackman. And this is fairly early on in the story. And it's like this wide shot of them. It shows the whole couch. It's a long couch, but they're just sitting right next to each other in this very mannered way, like in the center of the couch.
I know exactly
right
what you're
next to each other.
Yeah.
And it shows you their relationship, and without telling you, you're like, oh, these two are close, and they're very similar.
And they like have an actual concern about the situation. They're like trying to like they're trying to like inquire more about the situation. Like, oh, are you going to be okay? Like, are you going to come live with us? Like, whatever. She's like, he's like, we're going to go visit my mother's grave, your guys' grandmother, blah, blah, blah. And then you have Chaz going to Jeff's point, who's the kind of the thorn in the siblings, right? In the background, just flipping through a coffee book. And as he gets angrier, you hear the pages like flip like more violently and stuff, until finally he just slams the book and like bails.
Yeah. I love that scene. There's another shot with Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow when she gets off the boat, or he gets off the boat, and she meets him. And there's a uniformity happening behind them. Behind Luke Wilson, you have all these guys in white costumes coming off the boat. And that's juxtaposed with him in the foreground with his ridiculous costume. And then in the reverse shot, it has her. And there's also uniformity behind her in the form of buses with green. Mm-hmm. And so it's like them. It showed to me like they're cut of a different cloth than the reality that surrounds them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie it does that a lot, I feel, where it kind of creates moments that shows how removed these characters are from the reality around them. I 100% agree.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Another great shot is I just loved how when Owen Wilson is tackled by Ben Stiller after he runs into the house with the car, they just end up in a meditation garden.
I love that scene.
Yeah, they're in a Zen garden. Yeah, garden. Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah, because like he's gonna get up again. Like he peeks over the wall to because he kind of has this angry look on his face, like he's gonna flip over the wall and start beating his ass again. And then he lands and sees where he is, and he's just kind of like, oh, like he understands the irony.
They both are just like, I need help, And Chaz is like, yeah, me too. And it's I don't know. That whole wedding scene, I really like. There are a lot of those moments. It's like tying up. But I wanted to tie it to the end of this movie and like the redemptive arc, that kind of all of the characters go on at the end. It's like this ascension into like, okay, things are going to get a little better. It reminds me a lot of Boogie Nights. There's that moment when Don Cheadle is in the donut store with blood all over his face, grabs the bag of money, and then every single character, you start this ascent and this like build up where Roller Girl's going back to school, and she stopped doing so much cocaine, and they're getting back to making porno films, and Don Cheadle has a store, and it's like
such a great redemption arc.
I mean, it is. It is. It's like
hilarious.
She starts doing less coke, and they start making porno again.
Well, hey, it got a little crazy there for a while in Boogie Nights, where it was like they forgot what they were doing, and with this one, it's kind of like the music and the tone of everything starts to get a little brighter, because the film is kind of gray at the beginning, and then the colors really start to pour in like Wes Anderson usually does.
That final shot where it pans and it's an actual pan when the camera hands across the fire truck, and all of the characters are there kind of like interacting with the fire truck, and it's these characters interacting with the calamity that they cause in such a smooth way. It makes a lot of sense, and it kind of represents the whole theme of the movie right there. How he like puts on the hat and he's like, what? And he's like, you look funny.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this whole kind of like cute little wrap up to everything. It's like, is Dudley supposed to be Bill Murray's son?
No.
He's just like one of his patients.
Yeah, Bill Murray is like this, like he's like an anthropologist or something. He like
he's like a psychologist.
Yeah, but like he went and
like
studied
both,
a tribe for a little, and his new project now is this guy Dudley, who he thinks is like has like a yet to be determined psychological disability of some type.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's why he's like
he's like trying to he's like trying to like discover autism or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like discovering and outlining a new form of autism.
I mean, Bill Murray's great.
That's what I took from
like,
it.
Like when he's doing the little block thing, and Bill Murray's like writing his notes down, and he goes like he just laughs to himself. He's like, fascinating, and it's just so like I don't know. This film,
Bill Murray is best sprinkled in a movie.
He fits the Wes Anderson tone so perfectly as well. That's why he's in like every one of his movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's laying on the couch and he's just like in just the utter agony. Because like you feel bad for him because you could tell he like genuinely loves Gwyneth Paltrow's character. Like he genuinely like finds her interesting and he's just like, his whole life's coming apart, and Dudley's just like, you want to like play any word games or do any experiments on me?
Experiment on me?
And he's just like, no. Like, it's just, and you can see like the sorrow And the way he departs is just so great. He's like, let me get a cigarette.
Oh, that was perfect.
You don't smoke. And he just like lights it up and it like does a reverse shot and you can clearly see the no smoking symbol and the fire extinguisher like perfectly sandwiched in between the other two characters. And then he just like stands up, au revoir, and just leaves. It was like such a Bill Murray exit.
Bill Murray and Wes Anderson is a match made in heaven. The absolute driest comedy you can conjure on screen.
I mean, I loved that moment. That was another redemptive moment, I feel like, for his character, because it was like finally his spine grew. In the waiting room of his brother-in-law's suicide attempt, he's like, you know what? Fuck you. Like, I'm going to out you about, like, in front of your mother. He's bawling. She's been bawling Eli Cash. And he's just
he puts her on blast.
Yeah, and then he gets up and he just bails, and I'm like, okay, finally, because before he's like such a milquetoast, you know, and it's like they really cranked the misery up with that whole situation. I think that Wes Anderson did like a really good job. I love like the character that locks herself into a bathroom and whatnot, and that little scene of like having your wife locked in the bathroom, chain smoking all day, with a TV in there. That's like the only information you need to then deduce and like pull out that their relationship is just trash. And I think that Wes Anderson does that very well with the whole show not tell thing.
Oh, he's an amazing visual storyteller for sure. Just in the frame, like in a frame, you'll have all the information you need.
Exactly. No action is necessarily needed.
I think it's a good point to like highlight the significance of the suicide scene.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's probably a very like significant switch that the movie flips.
Oh, I was not prepared for how dark this movie
really
got.
And it's pretty unexpected, and it sets the tone for the film in a way that you just said, Alex, of like how for the rest of the film until the wedding, it's very dour, and it kind of like strips away a lot of the color and a lot of like the whimsical aspect of these miserable characters. Instead, it's like, oh wow, everyone is like hitting rock bottom right now. Like it's like, and like just the way he's like, they figure out about her kind of long string of lovers, Gwyneth Paltrow's character, over just her whole life, which I thought was interesting. And then it kind of hard cuts to just him in the bathroom, and he's just looking in the mirror, and he's just like, I'm going to kill myself. And then just does it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa. Like, it was just very, like, super real and very, very, like, jarring. And then it's quite a graphic scene.
Yeah, it is.
They don't pull the punches on that one. Like, Dudley comes in and finds Luke Wilson's character on the ground, just Richie, just, like, bleeding out.
Yeah.
Did you find this tonal shift and like narrative shift to be problematic at all in your experience, Jeff? Because to me, I feel like the second half of the movie it falls apart a little bit. It's not as tightly constructed, but I also think that like the other side of me thinks that that's totally on purpose, and it also works because that's about the characters finally falling apart as well.
It's hard to say. I don't think it was to the movie's detriment at all. I think Wes Anderson was just trying to like, I don't know. I very much kind of felt like he had a clear tone and intention throughout the whole movie, and this was just one step in that equation. Like he was like, okay, cool, like this is fun and funny kind of, and all these characters are whimsical, but actually this is the actual consequence of trauma and how this stuff manifests in people. And it takes a very like real turn that kind of makes your mouth go dry for a minute, and you go, oh wow, that's really, really sad. And so you kind of start to carry on, and all these characters figure it out, and then he's like very despondent when they're talking to him in the bed, you know, and like trying to like when they're gauging like how he's better, he's kind of just like, yeah, whatever, you know, okay, like he's still just as quiet and just as, so it's like nothing's really changed. And then even Margot asks him like, are you gonna do it again? And he's like, I doubt it. Like it's not really an answer. It's not a yes or no definitive answer, which is not what you want to hear from someone who just had a suicide attempt.
Right.
So it's all very real.
I actually I get exactly what you're saying, Jesse, and that's why I think I like this movie so much, and I call it the tightest of his films when it comes to the plot, because I feel like it gets a little wiggly there towards the end. How do I say this? It's like the perfect moment for that, and then it ends at the perfect time. And I think the length of this film is really, really good for it. I think it ends at the perfect time, because I don't know, I feel like if it went on for a little too long in that kind of really dourness, it would get kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I think it just goes on just long enough and then just ends just at the right time. Because it's pretty quick after the suicide attempt that the movie starts to wrap itself up.
Yeah, I think it went in a different direction than I was expecting when the whole Gene Hackman storyline with him in the house gets basically turned out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he gets found out by Danny Glover and gets kicked out. And I was like, oh, this is not going in like the way that I thought it would go. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I think actually it made it more interesting overall, because it's not just like the way that you expect it to work out.
Yeah, totally. No, they subvert your expectations. No, when it was revealed halfway through, like his whole ploy is revealed by Danny Glover, then like I kind of remember like going down to the time and be like, oh, about halfway in the movie here. Okay, I guess there's another plot that's going to happen.
Yeah, pulled the rug out from under you.
Yep, and there definitely was. And it was cool, though, because you got to see him get his comeuppance for such a horrible, like, scheme. And you get to see everyone kind of have their own reaction. It's not just like, oh, he's found out and he's the bad guy, end of movie.
Yeah.
It's much more deep than that. It's like, well, like, he didn't even realize what he was doing. He didn't even realize that what he was grasping for was trying to just, like, rebuild his family.
Yeah, and I think that is, like, the most beautiful thing about Royal and this story, honestly. I think that Royal is just, if I'm going to give props to Wes Anderson for this film, for its writing, it's mostly going to be to writing the character of Royal. And obviously Gene Hackman informed that a lot too, and helped make him come alive, you know? It's just, I've known so many men like Royal, fathers, uncles, you know, male figures, that it just, they painted the picture so well. You know, he's neither bad nor good. It's like, you feel bad for him, almost. Like, I don't know. How pathetic do you have to be to not be able to just be able to reach out to your children, right? Like, that's sad.
Yeah, that's so storybook characters that are also incredibly real people. It's an interesting balance that he's created. So, Alex, now that you've seen this 51 times or whatever, what do the mice symbolize? I missed the first time I watched it. I missed the explanation.
Okay.
That it was Chaz's mice. And so I was just giggling at these shots. Like someone will walk into the house, but it'll be a shot from just their shoes and the little mouse is walking around. And I was like, what's going on? And I was giggling and I didn't know what the hell. And the second time I understood the context of it. But I don't know. Is that just Wes Anderson whimsy?
Okay. So there are a few theories you could look at. You could definitely like write a literary essay about Dalmatian mice and what they symbolize in this film, and especially like in relation to Chaz. But Wes Anderson does this a lot, where he uses set objects and random props throughout the film that tell a story in themselves of characters, like the javelina, for instance, right? Royal notices that it's not up in its usual spot, and he's like, where did it go? And he finds it stuffed away in a closet, right? That little interaction isn't a lot, but it tells you something about the way the family feels about Royal, the way he feels about his own personal mythos, and then his disappointment, but also happiness in finding it in the board game closet, you know, like stuffed away.
I love that board game closet with its symmetrical framing and how they just have an argument in there.
Yeah, then you see like Clue and like Operation and shit in the background.
That's on my list of favorite shots as well.
But one more thing about this movie that I wanted to say that is probably true of all of Wes Anderson movies is the soundtrack is also a big part, I think. More so than other films. I think the soundtrack helps like inform stuff a lot.
It's almost like it's a movie.
Yeah, but in a certain way, I don't know if we've talked about like procuring a soundtrack as much.
No, that's something I know very little about, actually.
You know, like Shaun of the Dead has a great soundtrack of not original like music score music, right? It's like a track list of a bunch of different artists in there. This movie, Wes Anderson, I think, is a master of choosing songs from like pop culture, like real songs, and then blending it with original composer music. And I just think that it makes his movies so successful. I mean, the Darjeeling Limited is chock full of the Rolling Stones and the Kinks, but then also like Indian sitar cinema music, and then original like soundtrack music. I don't know. They're just so vibrant.
I like the Shaun of the Dead comparison because Simon Pegg, resin brain. Simon Pegg, he's very much into music, and like that's why they have that little scene in Shaun of the Dead with like them playing the records.
Yeah,
you know, and it's like the classic electro collections and stuff. Like he's very much into that shit. His first show, Spaced, had a lot of that, so I it's a good thing to bring up. And I just in this movie, I would say that the soundtrack didn't really hit me at all. Like I didn't find it added or took away from the movie at all. So it's kind of interesting that you said that, because it's one of those things that I just didn't even pay attention to. It was so much, these characters were so live and vivid that it kind of took away from any other types of critique, except for the fact that he likes a wide angle lens.
Yeah, I was sort of aware of it, but not as much as I would be after 50 watches. That's for goddamn sure.
So I feel like if you guys, especially for Jeff, I mean, if you watch Quentin Tarantino, his soundtrack procurement is fucking amazing, right? Like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, all of his movies, even Kill Bill, all those movies have great music. But there's like a certain, how do I say this? Like when you watch Quentin Tarantino's films, you can imagine him driving in his car and the song comes up on shuffle on his fucking phone or whatever, you know, and he's like, I'm going to write a scene to this. And that happens with Guy Ritchie. You know, Snatch, Lock, Stock. Mm-hmm. There are songs that make the scene so much better. Like Dusty Springfield, some of the old James Brown and shit like that. And you're like, wow, this is like your style. Like you like putting this type of music,
I see what you're saying,
in your films. If you watch other Wes Anderson movies, it's fucking full of it too. Life Aquatic is like David Bowie. Rushmore is full of that, of like old Who songs. This has Velvet Underground, Rolling Stones, you know. It gets into like a lot of classic rock stuff.
He has his voice, man, and his voice is definitely a part of that, like integrating pop culture elements. I like the idea of him listening to a song in the car and being like, I'm going to write a scene to this. I can totally see that. And it is
for sure.
It is also very Tarantino-ish for sure. Yeah, Wes Anderson, like I said before, he's in command. He knows what he wants. He knows what he's doing. It's definitely not to everybody's tastes, but you know what? That's okay. Like I had a professor who once said, you don't have to like something, but you should be able to recognize that it's well made. And this is really well made. Mm-hmm. I think that it's, to me, and maybe this would change in subsequent watches, it's a movie I'll definitely watch again. But in a similar way that I think Terrence Malick was developing his voice as an artist in The Thin Red Line, I think this is Wes Anderson developing his voice as a different kind of artist, different kind of poet, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
And I think it fires on all cylinders for me better in his later films, but I definitely think this is a great movie with a lot to tease out of, both emotionally, visually. There's so much going on visually that you could just pause it and giggle. And I think it's a great movie. I'm glad I finally watched it.
Me too.
All right, you guys, anything else to say before we wrap this one up?
Don't watch the new Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh shit.
Oh. Yeah, no, it sucks.
Yeah,
it's like written by a 4-year-old. It's terrible.
It's pretty terrible.
It's pretty terrible. All right, Reel Weirdos signing off. We'll be back next week with A Scanner Darkly, and we'll see y'all next time. Chicka chaka chapo. Now our podcast is done, and we have to run. We know it is sad, but we had so much fun. Don't be bereft, Jesse, Alex, and Jeff. We'll be back real soon. The Reel Weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Bo 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 bo.